In the previous video, I looked at different profiles of skew chisels and the pros and cons of each of those. In upcoming videos, I'm going to be looking at various different cuts that you can make with this versatile tool. But the focus of this video is going to be making a planing cut with the skew chisel. In the previous video, I talked about how I'm not really a fan of this factory grind with the 25-degree skew angle. The main reason for that is for some of the cuts we're going to be doing later, so the slicing cuts where we use the tip of the tool, mostly because these two tips, or the 2 points, they feel very different on such a skewed tool. If you bring in a much squarer tool, so something like this modified one with the 7-degree, those points feel much more similar to each other. And on my square beading and parting tool, those points are exactly the same. So as long as they're sharp, they'll do the job. What we're doing in this video is planing, and with planing you don't actually use the points or the tips, you're going to use the edge of the tool. Now with this factory grind, you can actually present the tool square or perpendicular to the wood. The grind on the edge here, that produces the skew or the shearing cut that you get. So if I just draw a bit of a line on here, not a very good line, but you can see that that's the kind of angle that the factory grind skew will be contacting the wood and producing that shearing cut. I can bring the handle round more, but if you come around too far, you can see that the edge becomes pretty much vertical, and then it won't cut particularly well at all. With a straighter tool, all I have to do to replicate that is to bring the handle round slightly, and you can see that just by bringing the handle round a little bit, I can match that that sort of skew angle. And the same with my beading and parting tool. Most people look at this and think, how could that possibly do a planing cut with a square end? And all it is I bring the handle round so that as it meets the timber, I'm still at that same kind of shearing angle, and I can still produce a really nice clean cut. So the wood doesn't know that it's a different profile because of the way I'm presenting it to the wood. So I'm still able to get a really nice clean cut from that tool. Now, the way to produce a planing cut is all about which part of the edge you're going to use. So it's really important to understand how the skew works, and also how things can go wrong as well, because you'll probably experience a catch with a skew, and that's probably why you're here. You want to see if there's a way you can use a skew without getting catches. So the first thing to understand is which part of the edge you're supposed to be using. And so what I'd always recommend, get yourself a marker pen and just put a line down the middle of the tool like that. And ideally you want to be using this lower quarter here, not on the tip, but actually on the edge, somewhere on that lower quarter. So somewhere about there. Ideally not above that line, but below that line is absolutely fine. Hope that makes sense. So I'd really recommend that you mark your skew up like that, so it gives you an idea of which part of the edge is safe to use. And what you can do is you can come up to the wood and don't turn the lathe on yet. Let's try and find where the tool cuts. Okay, ideally, there we go. You can see I'm getting a shaving there, really nice peely sort of shaving coming off there, and you can see that the shaving is coming directly from the part of the tool that I want it to. That makes the tool very, very stable because the tool actually sits on its bottom corner. Let me show you another angle to explain that better. So when you're turning, the tool is not flat on the tool rest. It's actually tipped up slightly like this. And if you're cutting in the right area, and so that's below this center line, the weight of the cut goes straight down through the tool, through the bottom corner of the tool and into the tool rest. And the tool is nice and stable and you don't really have any problems at all. But if the cut wanders above that center line up here, the problem is that the tool is unsupported. You'll read that you're using, in your books and things, you're using a part of the edge that is unsupported. And what that means is, because the tool's tipped up like this, there's nothing underneath this edge, which means that downward force that was perfectly well supported on the lower part of the edge, when you get above that middle part, the tool wants to sort of tip down. And the thing about the skew is it's a little bit of a drama queen. So it doesn't just gently go, oops, it goes bang, and you get a bit of a mess. So Mark out your skew and make sure you're cutting just below that center point, and that is the first thing to do to help you to master this cut. So once you understand that we're using this lower part of the tool, come back to the lathe and just rotate it by hand and really get a feel for where the tool will cut. There's a very definite place where it's going to cut and where it's not going to cut. As usual, what you're going to do is present the tool slightly low, and so nothing's going to happen there. That's just the bevel of the tool, so this lower bevel, just rubbing on the wood, nothing's going to happen. And you just lift the handle slightly until the edge engages, and there is the point where it's engaged. And you can see we're getting a shaving coming off the tool. Now, if you're looking at this and going, crikey, that tool's sharp, it is. Skews in particular need to be sharp, but all I do is sharpen it off of a 180 CBN wheel on a slow running grinder. You'll have seen the video earlier in this series which showed how to sharpen, or how I sharpen my spindle turning tools. If you didn't see that, go back and have a little look at that. The Skew's a very simple tool to sharpen, but I don't do anything other than sharpen it on that grinder. I don't use diamond hones, I don't use strops or anything like that. It's straight from the grinder back to the wood. By all means, if you want to, if you feel more comfortable using a diamond hone or whatever, it doesn't really matter as long as the tool is sharp. But if you're unable to produce a shaving like that as you rotate the wood against the edge of your tool, you probably need to sharpen the tool before you go any further. This is the first stage of being able to do a planing cut successfully. You need to be able to produce a shaving from the tool. Okay. Once you can do that, we can put some power onto the lathe. So we'll fire up the lathe. This is running about 1900, something like that. And again, we can go through that same series of steps. So I'm going to start with the handle low, and you can see that that's just the bevel rubbing. Nothing's going to happen there. That's just the bevel. And all I'm going to do is lift the handle until I get a shaving. That initially, we're getting a little bit of dust. Can you see that bit of dust? That shows me I'm in exactly the right place. If you're getting dust up here, above that line, stop and change your presentation, or just adjust yourself slightly. We're looking at getting that shaving on this lower part of the edge here. There we go. As soon as I'm getting this dust, this shaving, then I can start to move sideways. And you can see that I'm getting a nice shaving coming off of that tool. I'll do that again. And that's producing that shaving in a very controlled manner. It leaves a very smooth surface. We'll have a look at that in a moment. And you can see that the shaving is coming from exactly where I need it to, which means it's very, very stable. And you can see here, this is a very smooth. I've not touched this part. I'm just turning this part here at the moment, and that is a very smooth surface. When it comes to my signature beading and parting tool, this is my go-to tool, and I will use this on most jobs when I'm doing a planing cut, when I'm rolling beads, things like that. With this is much narrower, and in fact, if you compare this to the wider 19mm tool, my tool there, my signature tool, is about the same width as the safe zone on the wider tool. And I say safe zone mostly because that is the area that you're safe to use. Some people will tell you should use a really wide skew, and the reason behind that is because it gives you a wider safe zone. The wider tool, though, does mean that if you get it wrong, you probably get bigger catches. But again, that is a bit of it's sort of a mental thing. You know, if in your head someone gives you a tool and says this tool is easier or safer to use, straight away you're going to feel more confident with it. So with this narrower tool, what I'm going to do is aim to use the center of the tool. So you can put a little dot in the middle. Really, we're just looking at using around the middle of the tool. And again, if you want to, we can rotate the wood against the tool, and you can see I'm getting that nice curly shaving coming up there, no problem at all. So fire up the lathe, and we'll do exactly the same thing. We're going to start the handle low, nothing, and then we'll lift it until we get a shaving. And straight away again, you can see on the edge, the shaving is in the lower part, but again, I can come a little bit higher up on this narrower tool. Sometimes you can use nearly the whole edge, but certainly when you're first starting out, you really want to use the middle or the lower part. But that really goes for any skew. So no matter what skew you pick up, whether it's round or oval or square or rectangular or rolled edges or carbon steel or M42, it doesn't really matter. This rule is the same. Identify where the middle of the tool is and make sure you're cutting on the middle or below, and you will have that security, that safety to know that you can produce that nice controlled cut. Okay. Let's have a talk about the body movement involved now. So an important part of turning that probably isn't talked about enough is your body movement. And one problem I do see when people are trying to plane is that they tend to rotate their body like this, which means that when you start the cut, you can pick it up okay, but you have this tendency to lose the cut. And that's because you're rotating your body. The movement is very much side to side. So what I'm doing really is shifting my weight from one leg to the other. So I've got a very much a side to side movement, almost a sway if you like. And that means I can pick up the cut here and I can move smoothly from one side to the other. So that's something that's well worth practicing. The other thing that's worth mentioning is your front hand. Your front hand, the job of your front hand is really just to kind of dampen vibration and give stability. What it's not there to do is to pull the tool along. If you're pulling the tool with your front hand, that actually gives you less control rather than more. It's a slightly strange thing. You would think that would give you more control, but actually, certainly with later cuts, when we're going to be doing hand steadying and things like that, you can't use your front hand to pull the tool. So when you're steadying the wood with your front hand and you've only got a thumb there, it makes it very difficult to control. What you have to understand is the movement of the tool comes from your backhand and your body. So it's a side to side movement of your body, and your front hand is there just to help dampen vibration. So whether it's an overhand grip like I do, whether it's an underhand grip, doesn't really matter overly. I say I much prefer this overhand grip, but whichever you do, it's important to understand it's not really a grip. I'm not gripping the tool. The tool still needs to be able to move within my hand. So as I'm turning, again, let's fire up the lathe. As I'm turning along here, I'm going to pick up the cut and I'm going to plane along. Okay. So again, I'm not moving very quickly. Nice, slow, smooth action is really what you need. That worked well. And I'm not advocating this, but you should be able to remove that front hand and still be able to move fairly smoothly and fairly well controlled along the wood. It's not quite as smooth, there's a little bit of chatter, and that's what your front hand is removing. But even with just a single finger on top there, that gives me that stability that I need. Some people do use a kind of fingertip grip, but I'm never that confident with that. I always think these fingers look like they're a bit precarious between the wood and the tool rest. So I much prefer to have my hand on top so I know where my fingers are. So I'm here and I'm going to cut in like that, and you can produce that smooth cut. Now at the start of that cut, you may have noticed that I picked up a little feathered edge like that. If you see that, it's not really a problem. It just means you've engaged the tip of the tool. This is important later on, but for planing, you don't really want to engage the tip of the tool. It's okay if you do, and all you have to do is just very slightly adjust the tool presentation. So if you pick up that little fuzzy edge, that feathered edge like that, all you've got to do, just very slightly adjust your presentation so that you're cutting back on the edge and not on the tip of the tool, and you're good to go. Now, when I say make an adjustment, it's really very subtle. Sometimes when I've been teaching beginners, you tell them to roll the tool slightly and it's a big dramatic movement. Your movements with a skew need to be very subtle, gentle, calm sort of movements. That way you've got much better control. So we're here and we're going across like that, nice and easy. Now, I'm left-handed, so my natural cut is from my left to my right. So from the headstock to the tailstock. That's fine most of the time, but there are occasions where you want to go the other way. And you've got a couple of options here when that happens. Now, some people will swap hands. And that's okay. You can do that. If you're most comfortable swapping hands and going the other way, that's absolutely fine. I don't know any production turners that do that. Most production turners keep the tool in one hand and they will adjust their body to produce a cut that's going the other direction. So my natural cut is left to right like that. So it's sort of a cross in front of my body. The handle is kind of in my side. My hand is gripping the handle there, and I'm just sliding from one side to the other. So I've got those 3 points of contact: tool rest, hand, and the butt of the handle is against my side. If I want to go in the other direction, what I'm going to do is open my stance slightly. So rather than being fairly square to the wood like that, I'm going to open my stance. So I'm kind of looking at the headstock. My body is pointing at the headstock. Again, my front hand is just resting on top, and the end of the tool goes into my stomach somewhere here. So I'm standing slightly to the side. My stance is toward the headstock, and I'm just going to push the tool in that direction. Let me adjust the camera so you can see my body position as I do that. So my normal stance is something like this. Tool's in my side. I'm moving left to right. What I'm going to do when I go right to left is I'm going to open my stance. The end of the tool goes into my stomach. My hand's on top, and I'm going to push, not with my hand, with my body. So my body is just pushing the tool through the cut. Let me show you that in action. Again, fairly wide stance, end of the tool in my stomach, and I'm working in this direction this time. Slow and smooth, nice and controlled. That allows me to turn in both directions. So I can now go tailstock to headstock, or I can go back to my normal stance, which is planing headstock to tailstock. Once you've practiced planing in both directions and you've pretty much got the hang of it, the next thing to do, which is slightly more advanced, is to practice turning downhill or into a taper. It's pretty much the same action. You're going to maintain your cutting position on the edge of the tool. The only real difference is that as you're cutting, that same side to side action, as you're cutting, there's going to be a little bit of a tool handle lift as you go. And that is really just to maintain the cut on the same part of the edge. So we'll fire up the lathe and have a go at that cut. So my weight is over on my left leg, and I'm going to shift it across to my right leg as I go. So I'm going to pick up the cut. And as I'm making this cut along here, this planing cut, I've just got to lift my handle slightly so that I can maintain that cut along the edge of the tool. You can see the shaving coming from that lower half. Do that again. We're going to pick it up there, slide along the tool rest, lifting the handle slightly as I go. A little bit of a judder there, that's okay. Slow and steady. There's really no need to rush. Any of the cuts you do with the skew, you're much better to take your time and let the tool do the work. Let the tool cut. Give it a chance to cut, and that will allow you to produce a really nice, smooth surface beneath the tool. So this is with my signature beading and parting tool. I can do that with the more standard tool if I want to. Exactly the same. We're picking up the cut below center, so you can see the shaving, the dust on the edge there. Slide it along, slight lift of the handle as we go. And that gives me a really nice clean surface on the wood. So that is the planing cut with your skew chisel. I hope you find that video helpful, and I'll see you in the next video when we're going to be looking at the peeling cut with the skew chisel. See you next time.